and welcome to Washington Food Industry Association's Off the Shelf, where we bring you up to speed on all of the latest news and policy issues affecting independent grocers, convenience stores, and their suppliers. I am Washington Food Industry Association's President and CEO, Tammy Hetrick. Hello, thank you for joining the Washington Food Industry Association's Off the Shelf podcast. This week, I'm excited to announce we have John Ross, the President and CEO for IGA Incorporated. John Ross is responsible for the domestic and global operations for IGA, the world's largest independent supermarket network with nearly 6,000 IGA supermarkets in more than 30 countries worldwide. During his career, John has served as President, Inmar Promotions Network, CEO, IPG Shopper Sciences, and President, IPG Emerging Media Lab. He has held leadership positions with smaller independents and larger retailers like Home Depot, in roles ranging from CMO, store management, merchandising, advertising, marketing, and e-commerce. John's experience spans many industries and areas of focus. He's worked in operations, merchandising, and marketing, new, traditional, and digital media, and analytics and big data for some of the largest brands in the world, including Coke, P&G, Schwab, Publix, Walmart, Chrysler, Fiat, Sony, Bose, Google, AOL, and so many more. He has also helped launch and grow some of the world's largest proprietary brands at retail. He is a co-author of the Google book, ZMOT, Zero Moment of Truth, and author of Fire in the Zoo, a book about shopper influence, marketing mania, retailer chaos, advertising pitfalls, consumer confidence, converting customers, and how screaming at people usually doesn't work. John is a champion of data-driven decision-making, shopper-focused marketing, and active listening. John has a BA, a BS, and an MBA degrees from Tulane University in New Orleans and serves on a number of retail industry boards, including Food Marketing Institute, National Grocers Association, Consumer Goods Forum, Inmar, and the Coca-Cola Retailing Research Council. He and Marie, his wife of 25 plus years, live in Atlanta, where they have 3 kids and too many pets. John, I want to thank you for joining us, and you just have such an amazing history, and it's always great to have you with us. So thank you.
Well, I'm glad to be here. That is the longest intro ever. I'm so sorry for that.
No, I think it's great because it really sets the standard for you're a subject matter expert in a lot of areas that we want to talk about today. And I really wanted to cover supply chain and just talk about, what's happening globally. And, when we look at Washington State, how are we impacted differently than what you're seeing globally?
It is the really cool thing about the job that I have. IGA is the Association of Independent Grocers with about 1,200 stores in the United States now and growing, but also stores in China and in Russia and in Australia and New Zealand and the Caribbean and all over the world. And it makes us uniquely positioned to look at how a global phenomena like a pandemic is both common and uncommon, in different areas of the world. And I would say that if you could get on a plane, if we could travel right now, you mostly can't, but if we could, and we flew from country to country and we visited different IGAs across the world, I think what you'd find is the same kinds of problems that we're seeing in our stores here, whether in your fine state or in any state in the U.S. or North America or anywhere, that they're very, very common problems. So our entrepreneurs would be complaining about episodic and unpredictable out of stocks, not just supply chain disruption, but also some odd shopper behavior, which creates a very difficult experience for reordering and keeping in stock. They'd be talking about labor issues, and how difficult it is to retain and to attract new talent. And they would be talking about, pricing inflation in every single market. And no matter what language they spoke, I think everybody the room would be nodding back and forth, going, we see that, yeah, we see that, yeah, we see that. So the global issue, it's more alike than different almost everywhere.
That's very interesting. And I know we've talked a few times about the labor shortage, and we've tried to define different reasons for that, but it sounds like this is a global issue, and the trends that we're seeing here in the U.S. may be similar to other countries as well. Is that an accurate statement?
It is. I mean, I think the labor challenges we have here are actually not a new phenomena. Mm-hmm. Like, we were having problems hiring and attracting people, before COVID. And that was a long-standing issue. It's exaggerated coming out of COVID. I can tell you there are some really interesting things. So if you were to look at sales performance across country, because there's a lot of different issues in terms of products that retailers sell, or their labor models, union versus non-union, or their staffing models. But one thing's common, one metric we can all use is sales. And if you were to look at comp sales today versus last year versus 2 years ago versus pre-COVID, you would see that there's a pattern, which is the countries that invested the most in government, in either their equivalent of federal or local subsidies. Those chains tend to be doing better than the countries that made marginal investments in helping to protect their economy. That's kind of a convoluted way of saying it. In the United States, we're doing much better here than, say, in a country like China, mm-hmm. because, like it or not, we invested hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars back in additional benefits in order to protect people. And apparently that has paid off in a stronger economy than a country that did very little.
Oh, interesting.
And of course, that affects employment as well. So you can see some common employment challenges across those countries based on the amount of subsidies that were put into the marketplace, but not all.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And I know we've talked about China before. Early on, you were on one of our webinars helping our members just prepare for COVID, because China was ahead of us in that. And now, as we talk, you've indicated that China's kind of running parallel to the U.S. in vaccination rates and some of those other issues. So I think that's an interesting dynamic, just to talk about how now it's more of a parallel, although they were ahead of us many months in this.
Right. So in the beginning, it was absolutely a great predictor. What we saw happening at our stores in China, mm-hmm. was a very accurate predictor of what we might see in sales or in runs on product, or shopper behavior challenges 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 weeks ahead of our stores here in the U.S. But once we lapped it, and now that we're into unfortunately multiple variants and all the rest of it, I think most of the world is sort of learning at the same speed. Mm-hmm. And so we can't, I've stopped trying to use China as a predictor about what's going to happen. The other thing that makes China a little bit more difficult to use as a predictor is their response to the pandemic. So mm-hmm. they're a much more authoritarian country than you would find in Western Europe or in the United States, and they have implemented controls there and market shutdowns and community shutdowns in a way that we probably wouldn't accept in a country like the United States. So if there's an outbreak of the virus, they will swoop in, they'll shut businesses down, they'll close off. You won't be able to travel between province. Can you imagine the United States being told that you can't drive to Texas because there's an outbreak? I mean, I don't think Americans would stand for that, but right. that their response has meant that in some ways they've been much more in control of where outbreaks are taking place. They've done a pretty good job of keeping their infection rates below a panic threshold for their health system. Mm-hmm. But then the bad side of that is you have these shutdowns that will take place that will slam an entire sector. And we've seen that happen. It's showing up here in the United States. If you're worried about, are your Christmas goods going to arrive, or as a shopper, am I going to be able to get all the things that I need for my family? It's probably trapped on a boat someplace, and you trace that thread all the way back. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Shenzhen and some of the other manufacturing hubs in China all got hit by the viruses earlier in the year, and it disrupted everything. And so it's been fascinating kind of looking at the different government responses and trying to make a judgment about whether that's been good or bad for their economy.
Right. And that must be interesting too. We've seen just subtle nuances of that when we had a distribution plant shut down for just a short period of time. We had rural areas with no food on the shelves. So I can't imagine what it would be like there. And, how do you respond to that? How do you get those stores back up and running to serve that community?
Yeah, the availability, the complexity of the food distribution model in the United States, it's just as complex there, right? You have large distributors, you have medium size, you have a lot of local product and local supply. And I guess the good and the healthy thing about our industry compared to some others is even at the worst of the crisis, we still kept our communities fed, right? We found a way.
Right.
And whether we were buying out of the commissary side or non-traditional supply chain that we were able to port over into grocery, or whether we were able to switch between brands in order to make sure that there was at least some choice in the shelf, our industry globally did a heroic job of keeping humanity fed. And that sounds kind of arrogant. If someone from a different industry heard me say that, they might kind of squinch up their face. But really, the last couple of years has been our finest hour.
Yes.
Right. I mean, we demonstrated that even when the technology was not working for us, a min-max system means nothing in your inventory controls when the demand all of a sudden goes to a 3-year high. Right.
Right.
Or you're forced to deal with unprecedented consumer demand. Our system was designed, our whole industry globally was designed for comp store variations of like plus or minus 5. And when you go to plus or minus 40, the entire core infrastructure system doesn't work.
Right.
And so the fact that we were able to do it here in the U.S. with very modern systems, and we still were able to make it work in South Africa with perhaps not as modern systems, is a testament to some really heroic individuals that came to work and decided they were going to make it all going to still feed their community.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that leads me to, I think one of our big questions here is, our competition. And that's really been a challenge on supply chain. We've got large retailers competing with independent grocers, and I'd love to hear you share a little bit about that because of your background. You just have such great insight on how that works.
Yeah, it is demoralizing, right? There you're in your store, your wholesaler is sending you everything you can, you're on allocation, and shoppers are coming in disappointed because they can't complete their basket. And then you go over to a Walmart or to a club, and you see the products that you're out of stock there in multi-packs, and you just scratch your head and go, "How can this happen?" It feels like a great injustice. I don't really believe that any of our manufacturers purposefully discriminated against our channel. It would be kind of dumb because, the margins they make in those channels versus ours, right? That from a portfolio strategy, only supplying your lowest margin client doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't think there's an active intent. But the mechanics of the way our industry works tend to favor those supply chains in a way that does create the effect of non-competitive practice. And I can tell you, when I worked for the largest retailer in our channel, when I worked for Home Depot, our scale and our size and our influence, if we made a decision, it could cause a manufacturer to shut down a plant.
Right.
If we dropped them as a supplier, it might affect their stock price, and they could put them in financial ruin. And that power, when you get that large, the effect is that the people underneath who are supplying you, they are afraid to say no.
Right.
And it absolutely creates a bully, negotiating environment in which the big guys who say, I need to be in supply of my customers, suddenly things start happening which perhaps are not just. Now, if you were to get manufacturer CEOs on this call, and you were to say, hey, what's going on? They would tell you stories about, opening up new lines and working triple shifts and all the heroic things they did in order to stay in stock and to make it happen. And you would have, coming out of the first year of COVID, we all thought those problems were going to be behind us. And then all of a sudden we discovered there's a much more fragile supply chain than you want. But I think, for any independent that wonders if they perhaps weren't fighting with one arm tied behind their back, I think that it is likely many times in COVID that was true.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, John. I appreciate that. So as we look to the future of grocery, I'm sure, being in all these different areas and globally, what are some of the dynamics you've seen changing? More delivery, what are you seeing for the U.S. as we move forward?
Yes, certainly being afraid to be in a store accelerated the consumer's desire to have a digital relationship with their favorite retailers, right? And how many years acceleration in e-commerce did we get? It's hard to tell, but we went from probably low single digit to low double digit shopper engagement with e-commerce in the United States. I think the lesson there isn't so much about e-commerce. I think it's this idea of a new kind of relationship with the consumer. Right. So a traditional relationship, I know my customer, I know their family, I know what they buy, I'm able to provide customized service, right? That's sort of the cornerstone of what family businesses and smaller grocery chains, we've built our whole brand promise around that idea of that direct relationship. And it's easy to get into a trap of thinking that a digital relationship would somehow be less. And I think through this process, what we've learned is that's not true. That you can have a digital relationship with your retailer. And a great example of this, I was just in one of our stores, and, the team that pulls and stages the product for their customer, they will go take a picture of the steaks that they picked and send them a text going, hey, I picked these for you. What do you think? Now, the reality is that shopper, if they were concerned about the quality of what was going to happen before, now they're not. Right. And now they know the name of the person that's picking the product, and now they can have a dialogue about what's fresh in the store or really cool things. And pretty soon, the store and the shopper are having a dialogue about supply chain, and they didn't before, like, hey, these new blueberries just came in. You want me to add them to your order? And all of a sudden, you've got this new digital relationship, which is every bit as precious and special as the physical one in our stores. And I think the big trend here is going to be, as we go through, e-commerce in the United States is a first-generation experience in grocery. As we go through our second and third, how are all the ways that we're going to be able to use the technology to strengthen our relationship with the consumer and make it more precious rather than less?
Yeah, that's a great example. That's definitely excellent customer service in a totally different way. So, yeah, I really appreciate that insight. Well, John, is there anything else you'd like to share with everyone before we sign off?
Well, I think we've been given an opportunity. In the beginning of COVID, shoppers had to shop our channel because they were not allowed to fill their nutrition needs from other sources. So school lunches are closed down, restaurants are shut down. It forced them into our channel, and we grew share. And if you look at the data compared to, the last 5 or 6 years, we took back market share from restaurants and food delivery services to probably 2013 levels, where more Americans are eating food at home, prepared at home, than out in a restaurant or something that was brought to them. Now that's a very special thing, right? You don't often get that gift. Now we have to figure out a way to keep those people in our stores. And when I talk to our retailers, what they're worried about today is how do I attract talent and keep my store stocked, and how do I keep in stock with the unpredictable supply chain and all of that thing. But the thing I think I would hope they were also focused on, because you have to focus on that. Mm-hmm. The other thing is this idea of they were in my stores. under duress? How do I make sure they stay in my stores because I've earned it?
Right. Well said.
What are the things I need to do now in order to make sure that keeping their dollars in my store and continuing to eat at home is something that that the benefit of that outweighs going back to those old patterns.
Definitely.
And that may mean investing in our stores. It certainly means digital. You have to upgrade your digital. It means you got to stay on top of customer service, quality and freshness, and all the things that we do great. But there's probably never been a better opportunity in the independent grocer space to grow your market share than right now.
Yeah, that's a great point. Certainly something we can help our members with too, because we've asked the governor in the past to promote family meals, and he did. And I think it's something important that we need to make sure every year we're doing that, and maybe sending that message a little bit more than once a year. So, John, I want to thank you so much for your time and all your insight. It's always great to have you, and we welcome you anytime you have information you'd like to share with the group. So I will sign off, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Washington Food Industry Association's Off the Shelf. If you like what you're hearing, download all of our episodes from our website or your favorite listening platform. If you have story ideas, please contact me at Tammy, Tammie, at wafood, WAFOOD.org. Thanks for listening.